This podcast is sponsored by the new edition of the Bible for testing homes, Home Performance Diagnostics, the guide to advanced testing, with the latest tools and techniques that prove you're worth the extra money. More at homeperformancebook.com. Enjoy. Welcome to the Building Performance Podcast from Green Dream Group in Chicago. I'm Corbett Lunsford. Today we're talking about trends in high-performance building and retrofits with the green building curmudgeon, Carl Seville. Carl is an educator and a green builder and a consultant, all kinds of different things in the Southeast. You're with SK Collaborative, and you're also the author of the book, Green Building, Principles and Practices in Residential Construction. Thank you very much for being on the show, Carl.
It's a pleasure. Pleasure to be here.
So, Carl, can you make this show green for me?
It's too late.
Do you like it when people ask you that?
Well, you should have called me earlier.
So, of course, if you're listening to the show and you've been involved in a green building project, which we, of course, like to call high-performance building projects, generally, it's considered to be bells and whistles by people who think they know what they're doing. How exactly does that work?
Well, the funny thing is, when I tell people I do green building, they go, "Oh, you into solar?" And it's like, no, not really. I'm not.
Wind?
Solar's not wind either. What's really funny is I do a talk for people. It's like, forget about green, just go for good, because really what it is, it's just doing the right things. What I tell people is, if you just make the right decisions and use normal standard materials and practices, you can have a green building. But people design the building the way they always did, and then come to people like me and say, "Here, make it green." And it's like, it's kind of too late. You've made all the wrong decisions all the way through. And we can't put lipstick on that pig and make it any better than it is.
Mm-hmm. Although lipstick on a pig is kind of pretty. There's something a little perversely attractive about that. So what is the word green salvageable?
We're kind of stuck with it. I don't know that it's the best word, but it's what we got. I don't think we're ever going to change it. I agree with you. High performance building is probably a better description of it, but it doesn't roll off the tongue quite as well. Green. A friend of mine refers to something called green fatigue. A lot of people are kind of over green necessarily, so it would be nice if we could come up with another phrase. But I'm not sure we're capable of making that transformation in the market in terms of branding.
So can you describe, when you come in, when an architect who happens to be listening to this podcast says, "Oh, you know what? I'm interested in doing something like this." What is the very first step that they should take?
I think what they need to do is sit down. If they don't really get high performance building, sit down with somebody that does, a consultant, a rater, somebody in that vein, before they get far into the design at all. I mean, when they're just doing the initial preliminary stuff on the site, sit down and learn and understand how to make the building high performance from a siting situation, from the conceptualization of volume, from orientation, shading, building envelope construction. Because basically everybody does the same. They've been doing the same thing for years. They design the building however they want to. They don't take into account the local climate. They don't take into account shading and glazing and orientation. They don't leave room for the HVAC systems. So it's like, oh, we can spray the roof line and put the HVAC in the envelope. It's like, and I was a big fan of spray foam for a long time, and then I started realizing it generally, especially in new construction, a lot of things that we use that people think are green are really just excuses for bad design. So I was way into these spray foam roof lines, and a lot of people caught on to it. I was doing it 15 years ago. People are doing it now. And in most cases, if you just design to put mechanical systems inside the house, you don't have to spray foam the roof line. You can save a lot of money and actually have a much better performing building.
So leaving room for the HVAC as an example, what's the problem? I mean, do we just build a little room for it, or what exactly are you describing?
It depends on the house, but the issue is that most designers don't think about it. They just design the building. They don't really pay attention to the fact that mechanical systems need places to reside. Mm-hmm. They leave no room for it, and they just expect the contractor and the HVAC installer to figure out where it goes. And the challenge is, if there is no room for it, there is no place for it to go. So it gets crammed in the wrong place and doesn't work very well. Mm-hmm.
Or they say that they're going to use web trusses, and it ends up being joists instead. And so now you have to cut holes in a bunch of stuff.
Well, actually, I have this. I'm working on a project now. It's this green house that's about 7,000 square feet.
He just did quotes in the air, people.
So I forgot. I just forgot people can't see.
You might have heard it in his voice.
So it's a 7,000 square foot greenhouse, and there's something like a 500 square foot master closet, and the owner was completely flipped out that we were going to have to take some of that closet for a mechanical room.
Wow.
And the architect's really worried that if we don't fill up the mechanical room, she'll be really upset that we took some of her closet unnecessarily.
And I think that this is one of the things, I mean, when you're describing making room for the HVAC and doing the orientation and the site and all the water management and everything, that's hard. I mean, an architect really is not an expert in all of those different things, and they have to deal with the client.
Right. They're not an expert in it. I wish they were more attuned to it, and I think most architects should and could get a big chunk of that and be able to, say, get at least half of it or 3/4 of it, and then bring in the consultant for the fine tuning. But what I find is they often get very little of that, and they just are designing the stuff they've always been designing, and we come in and we have really almost nothing to work with. I've had a couple of clients over the years where they brought me a set of plans and they said, "Here, what can we do to make it green?" I literally said, "Throw it out and start over." And a couple of them actually did it. I said, you cannot make this happen. It's not a functioning design. It doesn't make any sense on the site. And a couple of times they got rid of it and started over and they got a slightly better house. They didn't get a great house, but they got a slightly better house.
How do we begin the conversation about windows? I was talking with an architect about it. He said, "I really like the big panes and the small frames because it's elegant looking." Like, I guess, a supermodel type, very skinny, kind of thing. And
but they don't perform well.
Exactly. So how do we even... Because they're talking about aesthetics, and we're talking about functionality. Mm-hmm. Where is the...
Well, it's tough. It's a great example about windows. A guy hired me. I was building this very high-end, super modern house, and he hired me to do LEED certification, which he ultimately didn't get because it didn't, he did all these things wrong, and he didn't care about it. But I went to do the final test out. It was a 65-degree day out. And this house was so overglazed, the air conditioning was running because it was like 88 degrees inside. Just because, he just didn't take into account. He had this wall of south-facing unshaded windows that fried the house. Mm. And
that's passive solar design, Carl. I put that in on purpose.
Oh, I saw a house once where the architect, it was a modern house on tour, and the architect had put this passive solar design note on the wall for the tour, and it was nothing even resembling it. It was a glazed room with no thermal mass, no shading, no nothing. It was crazy. Yeah. I get that people want views. South you can manage, north is pretty easy, especially in warm climates. East is okay. West facing windows. It's like people ask me, how do I shade west facing windows? Build a porch. Build like a 16-foot deep porch is really the only way to do it. And then sometimes people will put west facing windows in a room with a TV on the wall, and they can't watch TV anytime the sun's coming down. They just, you see walls of west-facing windows, and all the shades are drawn all the time. Yeah. So why bother to put the windows in the first place? Mm.
So when you come in as a consultant, is part of your job, as you see it, to help the architect confront the client about what the right way to do things is?
That's definitely a piece of it, and it's always a compromise. The client, especially in custom work, the clients want what they want, and in most cases in a custom house, the people have plenty of money, they can afford to spend extra money on heating and cooling, so they don't care that much about a lot of the energy efficient features or energy efficient design elements that make the house function better. Mm-hmm. Things like making it a little smaller. Not making it 7,000 square feet when 3,000 square feet is all you really need. Window orientation. If they got that west-facing view, they want the west-facing view. So no matter what, say, well, this room's going to be uncomfortable, and you're going to have to spend twice as much on your heating and air conditioning installation and your bills for the life of the house. But I do get people start looking at better moisture management issues. Trying to build the building so it won't rot and fall down. I try and get them to hire me to come in and inspect weather barriers before they cover them up, things of that sort. Mm-hmm. And I've seen some slow and steady, very slow and slightly steady evolution in terms of contractors and architects getting it and wanting to build better.
Mm-hmm. What's the frontier of education as far as getting mainstream people to just ask for this stuff instead of having the architect have to go out of their way to find a consultant to then bring into the process and try and inject us into the transaction?
If I knew the answer to that, I'd probably be a rich man. It's a matter. I've always realized that you need to create demand for products. Like I remember when I first got into this industry, I went to a great presentation, and this guy, it's really early. This is I don't know, 2000. This guy who was involved in green building in AHB. He was talking about creating demand for green building, and he came up with these great examples. He goes, who asked for a little phone that we could carry around in our pockets? Who asked for a little electric box that will heat your food in 20 seconds? There's all kinds of things in the marketplace that they were created first, and people figured out how to make us want them. So our challenge in this industry is figuring out how to make people know that they want and need our services. And I don't have the answer. It's going to be an ongoing educational process, but that's the challenge for us.
So I would think, the first thing that I think of when you say that is that we are not, first of all, each of us runs a small company because small companies are the secret to high-performance homes. You need somebody who is actually skilled, who can get in there and do the job and take the time and think and all that stuff. Whereas a product like a microwave that you mentioned would be marketed by a multi-billion-dollar corporation, and they've got all this, marketing staff and everything. And that brings us to the product mindset of people think that there's, like you said, the bells and whistles at the beginning, where you take a design and then you just put stuff, you attach stuff to it.
Exactly. Really good point. I always tell people construction in particular, I was a renovation contractor for me, so renovation in particular and high performance building in particular is absolutely all process. With the rare exception of the occasional bizarro toxic product, I don't care what products you use, as long as you do them within the right process, that they're all conceived of and installed properly. Like I said, you can use any kind of structural members, any kind of insulation, almost any kind of HVAC. Again, there's more efficient and less efficient stuff, but if you could use absolutely standard materials, do them right, have a much better performing house than a building that has all the high-end, fancy, air quote, green stuff in it that's designed and built wrong. And the simpler house with the less expensive stuff is going to perform much better. That's what, so it's hard. I mean, like I said, I was a remodeler for years. It's all process. Selling process is really hard. People don't care about process. They don't want process. They just want, they want a product, and it's a challenge because our stuff is not a product, except the new construction occasionally, if you're selling production homes, apartments, those are products. And a few people out there are doing them right, but not many.
Is it possible to think maybe that the process approach is more a benefit for the actual builder or the renovator who's doing it because it keeps you disciplined and agile, as opposed to what you mentioned earlier, where if you use a product, there are a lot of products out there that are like crutches. Once you start using them, the work really goes down because you realize that, I've got this diaper that I can put onto my building. Yeah. So is that maybe going to help? Have you seen that crews that lean on process more than product actually do a better job consistently?
I've heard of it. I've not really seen it in practice. With the industry's gone through such a weird change. We had the crazy times when everybody was making more money than they knew what to do with. Then we went through the doldrums when nobody was doing anything. And as we're coming out of it, people are just struggling to, they were struggling to make money. Now things are really busy. And people haven't ramped up their operations as much. So everybody I've seen is working on a shoestring. So they're running themselves ragged, just trying to make as much money as they can to save money so that the next time it crashes, they don't go down the tubes. I haven't seen too many people, both new builders, multifamily builders, and remodelers who are really taking the time to do it right. It's still very cost competitive. They're just pushing their limits to actually get stuff out the door. And even the ones who want to do high performance stuff, they're screwing it up left and right all the way through their projects. I come out and I'm constantly seeing things done wrong, things they missed. I just finished a renovation of my own house, and literally everything I didn't stand over and watch every minute pretty much came out wrong.
Do you think it's possible to automate that process somehow?
I think the challenge is we have an industry that has a very low bar of entry for everybody, for the contractors, for the subcontractors, for the staff working for them. And you don't know who's going to be showing up, and the subcontractors often subcontract out to other people. There's 4 different layers. There's really not much in the way of significant. I mean, there's training available, but there's very little required. You go to Europe, and there's sort of journeymen and apprentices and journeymen, and people learn how to do things right, and trades are respected. Construction trades aren't really respected very well here, and people drift in and out of them. They tend to be. They in general, people who are actually doing the work tend to not be all that well educated. They can make good money, but they're often not compensated as well as they should be. And it's such a it's a competitive business. Everybody has to get their three bids, and everything's pushed down to the lowest common denominator. There's lots of value engineering, and we've all seen this. Things like somebody, as a consultant, we come and we make a recommendation of doing a bunch of things, and one of them gets stripped out in the value engineering process, and it might cause the building to fail because it was a well thought out set of things that were to be done in a certain order, in a certain interconnected way. And if you just take that one little thing out, like maybe a particular piece of air barrier or a particular type of moisture barrier, the building could fail or not perform as expected.
So for those of us who are not familiar with value engineering, would you explain exactly what is, first of all, what it is, and second of all, what is American about it? Because I feel like Americans, there's these commercials out now, like, I do what I want because I can, kind of thing. Like, Why don't we just spend the money?
Well, value engineering is when, you have a project, a construction project, you get a price, and the price is too high, which I always used to tell people when I was a remodeler, there are two pricing structures, more than you thought and a lot more than you thought. Because it always costs more no matter what. You always want more than you can afford. So value engineering is the process where, let's see, if we do this instead of this, it'll save this much money. And in some cases, it's fairly simple. It's, we're changing the quality of a finish or the cost of a particular finish, maybe making the building smaller, things like that. But sometimes, something is chosen, again, some product, some kind of air barrier, some kind of weather barrier, some type of window, because it's a high quality product. We know it's going to perform. And someone comes and says, I can give you this window, which will work just as well for less money, and it ends up not being anywhere near as good a product. But somebody misses the fact that the performance isn't there. It's kind of like taking a piece out of a car that, cars are carefully designed, well-engineered machines, and if somebody just came in and randomly started swapping things out to save money. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like going to a Lexus dealership and asking them to take parts off of it until it costs what a Toyota costs.
Do you see, there's value engineering departments and divisions at companies, at the larger companies, and I don't know what they know about building or anything aside from just the product cost. What's the difference between creative thinking and value engineering, and don't you see that as part of your job as the consultant?
Yeah, absolutely. And this, one of the things I work with people on in heating and air conditioning, HVAC systems and design and sizing is probably the biggest key. So the biggest indicator of this is, somebody designs a house and they come in and they say, we need 5 tons of HVAC in this house. And first of all, we get them to actually size the system properly and discover it's actually only 4. And then you look at the building envelope and, okay, I can make the building tighter. I can shade these windows. I can move the HVAC and condition space. So then I get out to 3 tons, and you can maybe do a few more things and get it down to 2.5 tons, So I've done analysis of this in some estimating and also some real projects where we improve the building envelope, significantly, but without a whole lot. It's basically doing a better job caulking and sealing, making sure the insulation gets installed right, dealing with window orientation, and you spend some money doing that, but you put a much less HVAC system in, a much less expensive HVAC system. So it can be that can be terrific value engineering because it can maintain the cost and give a better performing building, maybe even lower the cost and lower long-term utility expenses for the house, which is really the great way to go. Mm-hmm. But the other funny, actually, I had a great conversation. I was talking to some builders I worked with. These guys had a fairly small house and they had an HVAC system on each floor. And I said, you guys have a small enough house. You could put a single system that's zoned. And I talked to 2 or 3 builders about this in a fairly short period, and literally every one of them said, my clients would be upset if I only had one HVAC system and the house down the street had 2, because they think they were getting gypped. When in fact, their house will perform better and they will have lower energy bills for the life of the house. Americans want what they want. They want bigger things. Mm. And we're really kind of an idiot society, honestly.
Yeah, that is true. So what made you want to write your book?
My partner got invited to write the book. It's a college textbook. It's the first college textbook on residential green building. He had some connection with a publisher, and he said, "You want to do it with me?" So I said, "Sure." And it was he's younger than me, hasn't been a long time in the construction business. He's basically been in the energy efficiency green building building performance, and I was 25 years as a contractor, so it was a nice mix. He's a little bit more on the technical end, I'm a little more on the practical building in the field end. So we spent 3 years doing a lot of writing, a lot of emailing back and forth.
That is a long time. Do you think, you've been around long enough that you've seen legislation come and go from Capitol Hill, and they're always like, oh, we're going to save everything, it's going to be perfect, and then it never happens. Do you think that that's actually something that is going to work someday? Anything that is just incentivized by the federal government that's going to be having high-performance homes and not just products, which is, I feel like we have to actually fight against.
Right. You're right, yeah, because there's incentives for ground source heat pumps, which to me is really kind of ridiculous because there's no sense in doing that, but they obviously have a good lobby. I guess, yeah. I agree with you, that's a problem because just like you said before, is the process people who are the really important people don't have the big lobby. It's the product people that have the big lobby. And people can latch onto products, they can't latch onto process. There was the Homestar where they tried that a couple of years ago to get incentives for high performance homes. There's lots of regional, some areas there's some pretty good regional incentives for high performance homes. Federally, I'm not a small government guy, but I'm not sure that our government can figure out how to do it right. It may be better to try and find some other way to maybe local governments, progressive utilities. Some like I think Austin Energy had one of the first green building programs because it was a city-owned utility, and they basically said, "Oh, we need to figure out a way to reduce our demand, or we're going to have to build another power plant." And that was really good thinking on a local level, which I like. Yeah. We're in the Southeast here, Power's run by the Southern Company mostly, and really all they want to do is sell more energy. They don't really care. They have incentive programs, and frankly, every time I've been involved with them, my feeling has been that they really are giving it lip service, and they're doing it in such a way that they hope the Public Service Commission will listen to them next time and say, "See, we tried it; it doesn't work. So can we please not do it anymore?" They seem to put enough money into it to give the appearance that they're doing something, but I really don't think from at the higher level, I really think they want it to fail, so they just don't ever have to do it again, and they'll get to sell more energy.
Yeah. What are you excited about in the next couple of years with high performance building?
What am I excited about? Well, I think I'm excited that codes are starting to crank up. I was talking with somebody yesterday about this. It's great that the codes are getting ramped up. It's frustrating that they're not being enforced very well. But we're looking at the 2012 Energy Code, the 2015 Energy Code, and they're going to require some pretty high performing buildings. I mean, they're going to be significantly better than they used to be, and it may actually take some catastrophic failures where some builders, go for the energy efficiency part of it, don't deal with the other important stuff, and have big problems in houses that will start to get the industry to change. But I remember, I think it was KB Homes recently had some enormous set aside for some building performance problems. I think they had set aside like $42 million to repair homes that had there had been quality issues during construction. Moisture management, air infiltration, things like that. I was hoping something like that could get them to change, but it just doesn't seem to be happening. I'm looking forward to things like energy guarantees. Actually, what I'm not looking forward to, but what was probably the only thing that will actually get this to happen, is for energy rates to skyrocket. When energy starts costing a whole lot more money, we'll figure it out.
That's something that the federal government could do something about, except that they'd all get unelected.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That is a problem. I kind of have this opinion that anybody who aspires to higher office probably doesn't deserve it. We just need to have some higher authority come down and say, "Corbett, it's time for you to be president."
No,
you have no choice. It's your duty to. It's like jury duty. It's like president duty or Congress duty. It's just like people have to be selected and rotate through.
Move out of your house. We're going to work for 16 hours a day.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's awesome. Carl, thank you so much for being on the show.
My pleasure.
Carl Seville is a partner at SK Collaborative. He is the author of Green Building, Principles and Practices in Residential Construction. You've been listening to the Building Performance Podcast from Green Dream Group in Chicago. I'm Corbett Lunsford. Tune in next time.